Welcome back to Gotcha Interact. Today we're going to be talking about the second half of the 5.0 banners today. First, looking at the first character, which is Kinich, and the second character on the other side of the banner, which is Raiden. Now, looking at both of these characters and possibly their weapons, let's see whether or not these characters are a good pulling option for you.
If you do enjoy the video, go ahead and like and subscribe and check out the rest of our channel for other videos you may be interested in. We do also have a Discord with a link down in the description, so do check that out if that's something that interests you. Now, on to the video.
So, like we were talking about, the first character we're going to talk about is Kinich. Now, we're going to get into more questions about kind of what he's going to do and answer a lot of the questions with that. If you guys have any questions about how he actually works as a character, we did make a pre-release video about him pretty recently, so the info is pretty solid about that. If you guys want to go back over to that and look at how he's going to work as a character, you guys can go check out that video we made on his pre-release analysis. But besides Kinich, Rift, what can you tell us about Raiden?
Yeah, so looking right into Raiden, just giving a brief synopsis of how she kind of works. With her normal attack, this is really not important, even in her burst state, which we'll talk about here shortly. You really don't want to level the normal attack at all. But looking right at her skill, this is a very cool skill, and it has a long duration of 25 seconds, so it's very nice and very helpful. What it basically does is it does coordinated attack damage. When you deal any kind of damage to an opponent, it will come out and do some damage. This is not just tied to normal attacks, charge, like you do any kind of damage, and Raiden's skill is gonna come and, do some electro damage from off field. So that's really cool. And then also it does increase your elemental burst damage of your other team members. So that is something that not a lot of people think about, at least actively, while you're playing with her in a team, but it is actually increasing burst damage for your other characters. So that's a nice cherry on top. Now looking at her burst, which is kind of the main idea of Raiden and her kit, she does a massive hit with her Musono Hirotachi, and then she can have an electro infusion for about 6 seconds afterward, and she does a lot of good damage there, kind of quick swappy, since it's not like a long-winded duration on field. So she has a lot of cool teams, and she does a lot of good electro damage. Also do note with the burst that you will be refunding energy based on getting those hits in her burst. So she is refunding energy to the entire team, including herself. So that's really nice for her and makes her teams and her playstyle just really easy to use. There are new characters coming out left and right, and if Genshin does anything similar to what Star Rail has done, you should get to know my good old friend, Det. If you're looking to lay down some money on some beautiful pixels and programming, then I'd highly suggest using Loot Bar to do it. With Loot Bar, you can top up your Genshin account at a cheaper price. It doesn't stop there though, you can use it for Honkai Star Rail and many other games that they support. There are several reasons why Loot Bar is awesome. Number one, they only need your UID and server, making it completely safe. No emails or passwords are needed. Number two, they offer 24/7 live support that I have tested at the most random times in the morning. Don't ask me why, or my wallet for that matter. Number three, you can easily see the reviews people have left if you're still unsure about making a purchase. And number four, you're guaranteed delivery in 30 minutes, but every single time I've made a purchase, guys, it has always been a matter of minutes, if not even seconds. Other creators have used Loot Bar to top up their accounts, so if you're looking for credibility, here it is. Check out the link in the description or pinned comment, because Mavuika is simply too hot to miss. Now, back to the content.
As well as long besides the actual character banners, talking about them, let's go ahead and look at the weapons for these characters. The first weapon we looked at for Kinich is now going to be his weapon, the Fang of the Mountain King. Now, this weapon's a little bit interesting and different, because this weapon at base attack has 741 base attack and a crit rate as low as 11%. Now, alongside of this, the refinement abilities on both the Fang of the Mountain King and Raiden's weapon, Engulfing Lightning, we're going to be talking about at Refinement 1. Talking about this weapon, for the refinement ability, it states that it gains 1 stack of Canopy's favor after hitting an opponent with an elemental skill. This can be triggered once every 0.5 seconds, and after a nearby party member triggers a burning or burgeon reaction, the equipping character will gain 3 stacks. This effect can be triggered once every 2 seconds and can be triggered even when the triggering party member is off the field. Canopy's favor elemental skill and burst damage is also increased by 10% for 6 seconds, and this gives them max of 6 stacks. Each stack is also counted independently, which means that as is consistently happening, if one stack is gotten rid of, you can immediately trigger another one. They don't have to stay together at the same time. Now, this weapon is extremely good, and we'll get to other characters that it's going to be great for. But looking at whether or not Kinich actually specifically needs this weapon, I think it's a very good weapon. Obviously, with a very low crit rate, it kind of keeps me in mind to forcefully think that it has to be on Kinich, and really other characters can't really even want this, or don't really want this because of its low crit rate, and that really kind of pushes it away. The 22.1% crit rate weapons are already pretty difficult to deal with anyways. To get an 80 over 220 for pretty highly invested characters, for instance, someone like Zhao or someone also like Arlecchino, it's pretty difficult to get to with their new sets, get them to an 80 to 220 or even better than that. So with this weapon, I think that's also going to be extremely difficult. The saving grace is going to be the artifact set that you can put with Raiden, or sorry, with Kinich at this point in time, though. So a very good weapon. Do I think that he needs it? No, but I do think that it's going to be an extremely good help for him.
One of our last videos, you were talking about how the weapons in Genshin specifically have, over time, they're getting more and more specific and very niche for the characters, right?
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. It's just like, that's what we've kind of seen over the trend of Genshin's last 3 to 4 years. But anyways, let's look at Raiden's weapon, Engulfing Lightning. Now at level 90, this is an energy recharge polearm of 55.1%, so that is nice, and giving Raiden energy is kind of all about how she works. She does more damage based on her energy, on top of her artifact set, also giving her more damage with the Emblem of Severed Fate, so this is very good for her. Let's look at the ability, assuming it's Refinement 1. It states that attack will be increased by 28% of energy recharge over the base 100%. You can gain a maximum bonus of 80% attack this way. And you'll also gain 30% energy recharge for 12 seconds after using an elemental burst. So like I was just talking about, it's giving her even more attack based on her energy recharge. So you've got 3 sources of like why energy recharge is so important for Raiden. A, it's in her kit and gives her electro damage bonus. B, it's on the weapon here, you're getting attack. And C, Emblem of Severed Fate. So there's a lot of reasons to actually be getting a lot of energy recharge on your Raiden. Now, as far as other characters go, it's kind of very tailored for Raiden, so I wouldn't recommend pulling this for other 5-star polearm characters. They just want their weapon usually, or even 4-star options are better at that point, especially for like Sino or Hu Tao. So I wouldn't be pulling this weapon for them, especially because the energy recharge isn't a damage stat for those characters, whereas for Raiden it is. There is one notable character though, and that's Xiangling. But once again, I wouldn't do that for her because she really does not need it. A Xiangling with the catch, if you do have this weapon for your Raiden, you can put the catch on Xiangling from fishing, and that weapon does really good for her because, all of the stats that the catch is giving, Xiangling actually really likes and can use 100%. The energy she really needs. She's one of the most energy-hungry characters in the entire game. If you play her, you know this. So, pulling Raiden's weapon does allow you to kind of do that. So it is a good pull weapon, and especially if you're going for Kinich, then the weapon banner does kind of raise in value because of that, if you don't already have Engulfing Lightning, but also are getting Raiden or already have Raiden.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that obviously there are some other characters that can use it, like Riff was talking about, but this weapon just, I think, stays where it stays, and honestly, Raiden is extremely good for it. But yeah, honestly, besides that, I think good weapon, but not sure about its usability outside of that. And now going into a little bit more kind of deeper ideas, talking about our summary section where we start to ask questions about whether or not, you should be pulling these characters, right? The whole video is questioned about, should you pull this character or should you not? So looking at both of these characters, the first question we have is, do you need either character on your account? Now, normally we look at, elements, roles, DPSs versus supports. How good are those DPSs and those supports? How good is that character at their element? Are they at the top of the game of their element? And in terms of that, looking at the element-wise, where you're like, look, I don't have a lot of Electro on my account. Usually a lot of people are going to be going right to Raiden. There are some recent characters that have been extremely good, namely one being Chlorond. And Chlorond's an extremely good character. And if you have Chlorond, there's, I would say, less reason to pull Raiden, but I wouldn't say that there's no reason. Chlorond is going to more fixate on possibly an overload team, but I would think that she probably sits a little bit better in an aggravate type of team, very much similar to catching. And so with that, I think Raiden kind of can go full-blown only Electro team. If you notice, her entire kit's only based off of energy recharge. She's very personal, very focused on herself. She does help other characters with their bursts, kind of getting those back up. But she likes to have characters that have high energy costs so that she can do more damage. So that's why, while it's still helping other teammates, she's still being kind of selfish in that way. So still with that, I think that Raiden's an extremely good character, and I still think at the top of the Electro characters, which obviously considering she's the Archon, I think there is good reason to say that. So in terms of that, I think if you need an Electro character, Raiden should be at the top. And I know characters like Sino are extremely good characters, and once again, Chlorond is a very good character, but I still think that Never mind ease of building, as well as just easily, she's got an easily, once again, Rift was talking about the R5 catch that you can get from fishing. It's very easy to get. I think she's just a better pull most of the time. Looking at the other half of the side, talking about Kinich, as much as I really like the character, and I'd really like to be able for myself to pull him, you really need to be focused very heavily into the burning team that he's going to be producing. And usually that means that you had to have pulled Emily, or you're looking to pull Emily on a rerun. And with that being said, also, you're probably going to have to be pulling Mavuika in the future to make sure that you have a really good buffer as an off-field pyro application character. Now, it seems like Mavuika could possibly be doing that, so that's why kind of running with Kinich as well as Emily, there's your two Dendro characters. Throwing Bennett and Mavuika in the team could be an extremely good, very, very strong team. But once again, just because of how he's focused, burn teams are going to be very specific, but I do think that he's an extremely good Dendro character, but I don't think that he's necessarily going to be spiking over all the rest. Now, he might be better than Tainari, but I'm not necessarily sure right now if he's going to be better than what Alhaitham can, right now, presently put out.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis, kind of at face value of just, are these characters something you need? But let's look a little bit deeper and specifically look at what kinds of teams you might be trying to build for these characters. Now, you just ended off with Kinich, so let's just keep going with that. You mentioned burning, and so yes, if you pulled Emily, you're probably thinking heavily about pulling Kinich, and that's a good decision because they are going to work very well together. They're kind of like a dynamic duo that we see here, like with Nervalet, Farina, other dynamic duos that we've seen in the past. So I think if you did pull Emily, then Kinich is definitely a good pull. But do you have to? You don't have to, because I think there are some pretty good burn teams already that don't even involve Kinich yet. Now, Kinich is going to be, the best in that department, there's no doubt. I mean, he's a DPS oriented character that works with it, and while Emily is a character that is oriented for burning, she's still just a sub DPS. So the DPS is, you would expect is going to probably output a little bit more, so that's what I'm expecting from Kinich. But Emily's going to be that off-fielder that's supplementing the damage that Kinich is also doing to kind of bring the whole team around. Now, if you don't have Emily, you didn't pull Emily, or you're a new player, even with 5.0, I don't think that completely takes away all of the value for Kinich. And the reason I say that is because I think he can be used in some Burgeon teams pretty okay, especially if you're still being able to get the burn off. I know there's a lot of different Burgeon variations that I've done ever since Sumeru dropped, and there are several of them, especially when I was using D-Luke. I was being burned to death. So there's definitely a way you can do that. And even when we talked about the weapon earlier for Kinich, it does mention when a party member is triggering burning or burgeon that you're getting effects based off the weapon. So the weapon even kind of hints at the fact that you can do burgeon teams. So that's kind of why I'm thinking about this. So that is something that you could do if you don't have Emily. Hey, even if you do have Emily, that you have the double Dendro, and you could still just throw in a Hydro and a Pyro, like Toma, namely. I think he's one of the best options for Burgeon just because of his off-field application. There's also Xiangling, but you probably don't want to change your build for it specifically. Now, when talking about Raiden for teams, Raiden has a lot of flexibility just because of how she works and the nature of her kit, giving, burst back, refunding energy. So she's great for a lot of different national teams. She gives Xiangling her burst back and kind of completely eliminates the problem of Xiangling's energy issue, right? So there's a lot of fun things you can do there. Putting in a swirl or whatever, just kind of doing a soup team. But one of the main teams that everyone does, and still to this day, is kind of just doing mono Electro Raiden. And also now, thanks to Chevrus, we do Overload Raiden. And so that's one of her best teams. One of her best teams leading up to Chevrus was Raiden, Bennett, Kazuha, Kujo, Sara. And now, when we got Chevrus, you simply replace Kazuha with Chevrus for a pure overload with the double Electro, double Pyro. It's a very, very comfortable team, and it's honestly quite free-to-play friendly considering that there's only one 5-star, but it outputs very competitive damage to a lot of other teams that have 2, 3, or maybe even all 5 stars. So it's a very good team to go after, not to mention Raiden just being a very high-value character from the start.
I totally agree with all those opinions that kind of have brought up why Kinich and Raiden are going to be specified to their specific teams. But looking beyond that question, let's take a look at, do you need the weapons? I'm going to make this pretty quick because we already went over the weapons already in pretty good depth. Basically, once again, we've already talked about Kinich's weapon is just going to be for Kinich. The stat sticking isn't even an idea really for this weapon. Just, once again, if you have Kinich and you can go for it, definitely go for the weapon. If you don't, or if you're a free-to-play player or you don't have the Emily, I would just say to just throw another weapon on him and go with something else, and then look to get Emily in the future instead of his weapon. I think that's going to better suit you as well, or possibly getting Mavuika might be a better choice than trying to get his weapon, just to be a smarter choice for you. Now,
sure,
if
yeah.
you're looking at, besides the Fang of the Mountain King, if you're looking at the other weapon, which is Engulfing Lightning, I do think it's a very good pull, and in my personal opinion, I would believe one of the best weapon pulls that you could ever make on your account for your Raiden. The reason why is because this weapon, once again, as we talked about, allows your catch to go from Raiden to get put onto Xiangling so that Raiden can take the Engulfing Lightning, which then allows, once again, just allows Xiangling to have an extremely good 4-star free-to-play weapon, but also allows Raiden to have just her personal weapon that just makes her extremely good. And I think it's one of the best weapons when it's paired with its own character. So when it's paired with Raiden, I think like when those combos of the character and their weapons is paired together, I think this is one of the best sets that I've personally seen in the game so far. So a very, very high value pull. But once again, if you can't get it, it's not like you're going to be, missing the moon and back. It's a very good weapon, but it's not necessary for any real account.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, part of the value of Engulfing Lightning is the fact that you're not just helping one character, that being Raiden, you're actually kind of helping out a build for a second character. And I think that's what makes it such a good pull, right? So I like how you mentioned that. But next, let's look at weighing the dangers between all the way from free-to-play players all the way to even your whales. So this is the part where we're going to talk about constellations. So there are going to be a lot of you that are thinking about, do I go after Constellation 1 or 2, especially for Raiden, because her C2, even to this day, is still broken and absolutely goated. And also, what about Kinich's constellation? So let's dive right in and look at that. But Vixen, I want to ask your opinion first on Kinich's constellations. If we can look at those real quick and then tell us what you think, which one is better.
Well, looking at his constellations, the first constellation states that after Kinich lands his Canopy Hunter riding High's mid-air swing, which basically that's in his skill, if you guys don't understand that, basically, when he's in the air and he's running around and then he does a hit, when he does that, his movement speed will increase by 30% for 60 seconds, possibly just allowing him more speed to get less hits on top of him, which is going to be very useful for him. But also, additionally, the Scale Spiker Cannon's crit damage increased by 100%. Now, the Scale Spiker Cannon is basically you're going to get a bunch of stacks and whatever, and as he's going to be, I believe, increasing slowly his Night Soul points, he's going to be slowly increasing, and then as soon as he hits his cap, then you're going to be holding or using the skill again to do a huge damage hit called Scale Spiker Cannon. And that's what the damage is increased here. It's by 100% of its crit damage. A very big part of his kit that he can do pretty semi-consistently, very much to what Mualani's going to be able to do with her big hit. So it's not all the time, it's not every single hit, but it is pretty often. And that 100% damage, crit damage increase is extremely good. Now, alongside of that, the C2 states that when Kinich's elemental skill hits an opponent, which is very frequently, it will decrease the danger resistance by 30% for 6 seconds. Additionally, the first Scale Spiker Cannon Kinich fires after entering the Night Soul's Blessing has increased AoE, and its damage increases by 100%. Now, I understand that the C1 is already extremely good because of the crit damage increase of 100, but honestly, that C2 is just disgusting. If it just stopped with the danger resistance of 30%, I already think it almost rivals the C1 in strength. Now, when you get the C2, you're already getting the C1, but we're trying to see is it worth it to go to C2. With the extra help of increasing the AoE for that first Scale Spiker Cannon you do, and the damage increase, basically doubling its damage, giving another 100% of the damage on top of what you've already done, doubling the damage, I just feel like that C2 just blows the C1 out of the water. The C1's extremely good, don't get me wrong, but I do think it might be worth it to just go after the C2 if you're looking for constellations to go pretty deep into Kinich.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like it's one of those characters where, and we recently talked about this in our last video, I think, when we were looking at Eidolons for those other characters, but it's one of those characters where it doesn't feel like the C1 is a gatekeeper to the amazing C2. It feels like a stair step once again. I like that analogy because it's showing how, like, when you go towards that C2, you're getting kind of sort of equal value out of the C1, or maybe not equal, but a little bit less. And it's not like, once again, it's not like, a gatekeeper, where Raiden when we look at her constellations here, she feels a little bit more like that. So let's take a look at that real quick. Looking at Raiden's cons, her first one states that the Chakra Desiderata will gather resolve even faster. Basically, if you don't know how Raiden works, I would look up a guide if you are pulling her first off, so that's the best thing you can do for yourself. But basically, she has this ring behind her, and as you use other characters' burst, it builds up that Chakra Desiderata is what it's called for the resolve, and the more of that circle behind her that's filled up, the harder her burst hits. So C1 is basically just increasing that to fill at a higher rate and basically guaranteeing that you'll fill it up completely if you use an entire rotation and all the bursts. Also, when Electro characters use their elemental burst, the resolve gain is increased by 80%. Once again, just encouraging more mono Electro, which if you're using Kujo Sara, one of her more favored supports, that's going to help a lot. So you're basically going to, like I said, you're just going to fill up her resolve pretty much all the way every single time. When characters of other elemental types use their elemental burst, the resolve gain is increased by 20%. So not as much as Electro, but it's still there. So the C1's pretty good, but you don't need it because you can still build resolve organically, right? So yes, it's going to be a little bit more damage, but let's look at the C2. While using Musono Hirotachi and in the Muso Ishin state applied by her burst, the Raiden Shogun's attacks ignore 60%, 60, okay guys, of opponent's defense. That is a massive ignorance of defense. Like, you're dealing a lot more damage now with her initial hit. That's a massive hit, and then all those attacks afterward. It's not just the initial hit, but it's also those attacks afterward, which if you have a good invested Raiden with the weapon, you have the C2, your normal attacks are like 60k, your charged attacks are even higher. It's absolutely absurd how much damage she can put out. She's very, very bursty. So like I was talking about, C1 feels kind of like a gate towards getting the amazing C2, whereas with Kinich, they're both really good. I mean, 100% crit damage in that C1, that's pretty nutty, guys. And then the C2, Dendro resistance, that's pretty nutty, guys. Like, it's just so good. So if you are thinking about Constellations, just know that with Kinich, I think you can sit at C0, especially if you already had Emily. Pull the weapon, of course, first. If you didn't pull Emily, then honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about his cons and probably just save and get Emily later, or get his weapon first. It's usually better to get the weapon for the characters before going after Constellations. Usually, if you're going after Constellations, I would assume you have the weapon at that point because it just makes more sense. Like, you know, if we use Arlecchino as an example, if you're going after C2 Arlecchino, which there's quite an amount of people that did that, you usually are pulling her weapon. And with Nervalette, you'll hear the argument, is his weapon better or is the C1 better? Because the C1 on Nervalette's really good. Most of the time, though, it's still the weapon. Having the weapon for the character is usually the first barrier to going more than, you know, the 90 or 180 wishes of just getting the character in the first place. So just a brief overcap of the Constellations. Kinich, not necessary, but it's an easy and honestly pretty good value C1 and C2. You can sit at C0 or even C1, or go ahead and go for the C2. Whereas Raiden, if you are going for Constellations, you're targeting C2. Don't sit at C1. If you get C1, you might as well go for C2 because it's that good, and C1 really just gets overlooked, and with reason.
I totally agree, because as someone who accidentally got even to a C3 Raiden, it's once you, and I've done the same thing, and as Rift was talking about, both with my Arlecchino, you actually called me out here on both of the characters I brought to C2. With Arlecchino even getting to C2, I still went for the weapon first. And I lost to the first Great Magic twice before getting that weapon. And I still purposely went for that weapon first before even thinking about going for Constellations. The same thing with Raiden. I had Raidens from her first release, and then only until her second or her first rerun did I actually go after her weapon and her two Constellations afterwards. I still went and got Engulfing Lightning, thankfully got it immediately, and went for her C2 immediately right after. So most of the time, weapons first, Constellations second.
Well, we hope that this video could help you decide on whether these characters or even the weapons coming up on these next banners are for you.
As always, if you have any suggestions about the video, please go ahead and let us know down in the comments, either to help other players or even to just let us know some extra things about the characters, about how you plan to pull for them or not pull, whether these are easy skips or if you guys are going after Constellations or whatnot. Once again, make sure to like and subscribe the video. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. We'll see you guys in the next one.